Thanks to history, we learn to appreciate peace, understand sacrifice, and realize that everything we have today was built on the sweat, tears, and wisdom of generations before us. To understand history is also to understand ourselves, so we can walk more firmly into the future. Now, I invite you to join me in exploring how the trench system actually worked to truly feel the harshness and brutality of war. When World War I exploded onto the scene in 1914, nobody anticipated that Europe would become locked in a frozen, agonizing stalemate of mud and barbed wire. Yet, by the close of that first winter, the Western Front had morphed into an immense labyrinth of fortifications, stretching relentlessly from the North Sea all the way to Switzerland. Today, we will step into that unforgiving world, not merely to rattle off statistics, but to truly feel what a soldier experienced when he descended into those trenches. Our story unfolds in northern France, not far from the Somme, on a biting morning in 1916. A thick fog clings to the ground. The air hangs heavy with the scent of damp earth and the acrid tang of smoke. A young soldier, whom we'll call Thomas, carefully climbs down a wooden ladder into the frontline trench. At first glance, the trench seems deceptively simple, a long, narrow ditch gouged out of the clay soil. But as Thomas begins to walk, he quickly realizes the stark reality. This is a self-contained world, a realm unto itself. The trench doesn't run straight. Instead, it twists and turns sharply every few meters, forming a zigzag pattern that feels like navigating the corridors of some subterranean fortress. These sharp angles weren't arbitrary design choices. They were crucial for survival. A single artillery shell or a sudden enemy assault couldn't sweep through the entire trench's length. Each turn provided a small measure of protection against the all-encompassing chaos. The trench walls rise high above Thomas's head, supported by sturdy wooden planks. Duckboards line the trench floor. Without them, he would sink ankle-deep, sometimes even knee-deep, into the vile, fetid trench mud, a clinging sludge that swallowed boots as readily as quicksand. Rats dart along the edges, brazen enough to stare directly at the men. They've grown fat and bold, thriving among the soldiers and the ghastly leftovers of war. A piercing whistle shrills from somewhere down the line. It's not an attack, merely a warning, signaling the soldiers to stand ready. Thomas reaches a firing step, a narrow ledge carved into the trench wall. From this vantage point, he can cautiously peek over the parapet. He sees a scene of utter devastation. Shell craters scar the landscape. Shattered trees stand like skeletal remains. Rusting barbed wire snakes across the ground like lifeless vines. And somewhere across that desolate, muddy expanse, perhaps only 100 meters away, German soldiers stand in their own trenches, watching back with equal vigilance. But the frontline trench is just the beginning. Behind it lies the support trench, and further back still, the reserve trench. These three main lines together constitute what soldiers call a defense in depth. If the enemy manages to overrun one trench, the next line slows them down, and the one after that has a chance to stop them completely. It's a system deliberately designed not for comfort, but for sheer survival. To move between these lines, Thomas uses a communication trench, a narrow, winding path that snakes backward through the earth. Here, couriers rush through with vital messages. Stretcher teams carry the wounded to the rear. Occasionally, artillery shells slam into the earth nearby, filling the air with dirt and a deep, cracking boom that Thomas feels deep in his bones, even more than he hears it. At dawn, he reaches a dugout, an underground shelter carved into the trench wall. It's dark, cramped, and reeks of damp wool and the stale odor of unwashed uniforms. Yet to the weary soldiers, this rough, makeshift wooden cave is precious. It's the one place where they can find a moment's respite, even if it's just to sit on a crate and breathe. But the trench system is far more than just wood and mud. It's a living, breathing rhythm. There's the morning stand to, when every soldier is roused before sunrise, because that's the hour when most attacks are launched. There's the constant, unending repair work, fixing collapsed walls, replacing sandbags, draining water to prevent the trenches from flooding like canals. And there's the relentless battle against boredom and fear, two enemies as dangerous and real as any bullet. Thomas soon discovers that the most terrifying part of trench warfare is the waiting. The distant rumble of artillery rolls like thunder across the front. The sudden, unnerving silence that follows. Then, the chilling whistle of incoming shells. Men duck instinctively as the explosions shake the earth. Soil rains down upon them. The trench groans under the impact. Somewhere nearby, a man screams for a medic. And yet, life, in some twisted way, continues. At night, small patrols slip out into no man's land. They crawl on their bellies, straining to hear enemy work crews repairing wire or digging new positions. Sometimes they return safely. Sometimes they simply vanish. Then comes an order. A trench raid. Thomas's heart clenches with dread. These raids meant climbing over the parapet, sprinting across the broken, cratered ground, and leaping into the enemy trench. They were quick, brutal, chaotic affairs. A clash of fists, rifles, grenades, and shouts in the darkness. And within minutes, the raiders would retreat before the enemy could organize a counterattack. Why risk such perilous missions? To gather intelligence. To keep the enemy on edge. To remind them that even in the quietest moments, dangers still lurked. But for all the omnipresent violence, the trench system also created strange moments of profound silence. A quiet sunrise. A bird landing on a shattered tree limb. Soldiers across the lines shouting jokes and taunts to each other. War is undeniably ugly, but sometimes, even in the mud and blood, humanity stubbornly refuses to disappear entirely. As the months crawl by, Thomas begins to understand the trench not as a mere structure, but as a lived experience. It shapes the soldiers who inhabit it. It hardens them. It utterly exhausts them. But it also binds them together in a way they never thought possible. Each man depends on the man beside him more than he ever could have imagined. And yet, for all its apparent strength, the trench system is not invincible. By 1918, new tactics, creeping barges, stormtrooper assaults, and the advent of tanks begin to break the agonizing stalemate. The long, continuous chain of trenches starts to crumble and fragment. Soldiers sense a subtle but unmistakable shift in the air, as if the war itself is gathering momentum for a final, decisive push. But what exactly caused the seemingly impregnable trench system to collapse? And how did the soldiers trapped inside experience those final, chaotic months of the war? Before we continue this journey into the past, if you appreciate true stories told with emotion and clarity, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps us bring history to life, one story at a time. And now, the real question that looms large. What happened when the trenches finally broke open, and the war lurched towards its bloody conclusion?